Chapter 248 of JJK is out, and while I try to not report on every single chapter of JJK that comes out, for what's felt like the last couple of months, JJK has only come out every other week. And since my self-allotted limit of how many times I'm allowed to post about JJK on this page is 1 out of every 4 videos, because we need to talk about other manga and anime, and I already have an entire YouTube channel dedicated to one IP, covering the manga when it comes out has been kind of perfect because I post 2 videos a week. And thus, if we only get 1 manga chapter every 2 weeks, that falls perfectly into that 1/4 ratio. But also, I only try to report on the manga chapters that are really good. Is it a Gegegatami yapping chapter? Or is it an intense battle chapter that goes beyond the spectrum of manga fights that I knew were possible? Well, this week's chapter was kind of both. Well, at least according to the internet. You see, because the online Discord surrounding this chapter is a little bit all over the place, but then again, it's JJK. It's always kind of that way. And that's mostly because there's 2 camps of JJK fans. There's those who want every piece of exposition, dialogue, and yapping possible, and then there's those who just want to see the punchies land. But boy oh boy, was this not a chapter for having the punchies land. And thus, whether or not this is one of the greatest chapters in JJK history, or one of the more boring, is entirely up to you, because while this chapter does have some incredibly high highs, it also's got a fair amount of, let's call them, Gegeisms. You see, because this chapter does not only reveal that Yuji over the course of the last month has mastered reverse curse technique, like to the level that he's able to regenerate the entirety of his stomach missing in a matter of moments, but it also confirms one of the most highly mysterious parts of all of JJK, Wee's technique, and set up what could be the final fight of the entire manga, while also revealing Sukuna's grand final plan. But at the same time, there's also about 7 pages of borderline useless dialogue from Sukuna. So today, I'm gonna let you form your own opinions about this chapter by giving you all the facts and tying in all the possible theories and confirmations that we got from the facts that we were given in chapter 248. So get ready to put your opinion hats on, because today we're talking chapter 248, or Sukuna's final plan revealed. But before we get to talking about anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me breaking down some of the newest anime and manga, then you're gonna love my podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata talk about all things anime. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or if you just want to look like somebody who keeps up with all the trends of anime, then go ahead and meander into my merch store, otakusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. So, Chapter 248. It opens up right where Chapter 247 left off, with Yuji holding the Executioner blade poised to stab Sukuna in the back. But before Yuji is able to complete the motion of stabbing this blade into Sukuna's back, it fades. Kind of like I predicted. Well, technically, I didn't predict that the sword would fade out of existence. But what I did predict after the conclusion of Chapter 247 is that there's no way that Sukuna's gonna die. It just wasn't right. It felt too early, we haven't established who inherited Kenjaku's will, and while it sounds kind of ridiculous, Yuji hasn't gone through enough. And really, did anybody think that Yuji was gonna pull off killing Sukuna in Chapter 248? I know the Gegegatami said at Jump Festa that JJK would be done by the time that next year's Jump Festa happened, but we didn't think it was gonna be like a month later, did we? However, the Executioner blade fading from existence might actually be good news, at least for Higuruma. Now, before I get into all this, I'd like to establish the fact that I am so tepid on Higuruma as a character. I have no biased opinion on this. I don't dislike Higuruma as a character, but I also don't love him. Like, I fully understand that there's nothing wrong with Higuruma's character. I appreciate his character development arc. I think him being a public defendant who falls out of love with the legal system is cool. I think that the potential he showed as a new sorcerer was really interesting, and I think his techniques were really cool. But like, I don't know, if I had to make a top 10 favorite characters in JJK, he's not making the list. See, the reason that I'm telling all of this to you is that the reason that this might be good news is that Higuruma's blade fading from existence means that he might actually still be alive. See, in Chapter 247, Higuruma is talking with Kusakabe, and in this conversation, essentially Higuruma is setting up the fact that curses get stronger after you die. And both him and Kusakabe agree on this fact. And therefore, hypothetically, if his curse technique was still manifested after his death, then it shouldn't get weaker, but stronger, which means that the Executioner's sword fading from existence means that he's probably still alive and that he ran out of cursed energy. Because if he had died, the Executioner blade would have gotten stronger, and Yuji might have actually been able to stab Sukuna in the back. And Higuruma remaining alive is actually backed up by a couple of other points that happen in this chapter. But having the theory of Higuruma is alive runs counter to basically everything that Sukuna says, as immediately after watching the Executioner's sword fade out of existence, he says, oh, even though that sorcerer died, he took Kumatoke with him. Now, Kumatoke was Sukuna's weird cursed weapon that uses electrified CE that Kashimo was invulnerable to and that Judge Man confiscated eradicated, and thus Sukuna is saying that Kamitoke is gone forever. But he's also saying that Higuruma is also gone forever. Then again, in chapter 247, Sukuna believed that the piercing blood shot at him was from Chozo, who he double-rinned. So maybe Sukuna's perception isn't the greatest, as it seems fairly obvious, at least to me, that the person who shot that piercing blood was Yuji, not Chozo. Especially because we as readers never saw Chozo like wounded standing trying to shoot a piercing blood at him. On top of this, after Sukuna makes this astute observation, Weeb and Kirara show up to pick up Higuruma's body. And while he doesn't look great when they pick him up, he also doesn't look super dead. On top of this, after Weeb or Yi or however you say his name and Kirara pick up Higuruma, Sukuna makes the observation and confirms a theory that many of us have had for years, ever since the Mei scene, that Yu victim has a teleportation technique. Which is why Mei says, while on the phone with apparently stockbrokers or the Illuminati, that she and Wee escaped Japan by using his technique, which tired him out. Now, we still don't know the particulars of his technique, but we know it's a teleportation technique. Probably has the ability to set a marked point, like a hotel room in Malaysia or wherever Shoko is, and then jump to and from that point. But it could also be free and completely limitless teleportation. We just don't know. On top of this moment of these two coming for Higuruma's body confirms to us beyond any shadow of a doubt that Kenjaku will never get Gojo's body. We know this because Sukuna, upon watching them pick up Higuruma and teleport him away to Shoko, says, oh, that's why Gojo's body disappeared earlier. And while technically, now that I'm saying it out loud, all that really confirms to us is that Gojo's body disappeared. And I guess you could just as easily make the argument that Weeb and Kirara got Gojo's body as basically anybody else. But considering the fact that Weeb got to Higuruma in a matter of like 3 seconds after him collapsing, I feel as though it's pretty safe to assume that they're the ones who collected Gojo's body. However, them getting both of these bodies, to me at least, is somewhat curious. See, I understand learning from your techniques and not leaving corpses laying around for Kenjaku to stumble upon. If we hadn't done that in the first place, Kenjaku wouldn't be nearly as strong as he is now. Or was. But the Jujutsu Sorcerer Coalition, or Team Kusakabe as I call them, knew Kenjaku's location. In fact, they had a plan to kill him. And I know they knew Kenjaku's location because not only did they get Yuta there, but they also got Takuma there. Which means that Team Kusakabe has had a lock on Kenjaku's location almost this entire time. And while sure, Kenjaku's got a bunch of cursed spirits lurking around that could have picked up any of these bodies, they had a plan to assassinate Kenjaku far away from Gojo's body. And Kenjaku didn't seem all that interested in Gojo's body. He just watched Gojo die on his personalized television stream and then went, huh, all right, cool, thank God for Sukuna. And yet Team Kusakabe put their lives on the line to collect these bodies. And while one could say that they're just being redundant, I can guarantee you when this chapter actually becomes live and official, that this revelation that Weeb and Kirara were able to collect Gojo's body and bring him to Shoko will 1000% reignite the passion of all Gojo fans on Earth. Listen, when this chapter comes out on the 21st, you better believe that the JJK fandom will pretty much all but just simply agree for another week or two that Gojo is just alive again. This is going to be the heaviest relapse on copium we've ever seen. A copioid crisis, if you will. And I, for one, am actually kind of excited to see it happen. On top of all of this, the fact that Weeb and Kirara decided to collect Higuruma, even though they should probably know that Kenjaku is dead by now, is another point in the column of Higuruma still probably alive. Because even Sukuna in this chapter is able to make the revelation that Kenjaku was dead. And it's not like Kenjaku was able to get that message along to Sukuna. Yuta would be able to get that message along to Team Kusakabe. Everybody has cell phones. Oh wait, but do cell phones not work within culling game barriers? I don't know, use Mei's crows or something. I'm sure everybody knows that Kenjaku is dead. Sukuna doesn't seem impressed by this body collection scheme, as he believes that Shoko shouldn't be able to heal people at even half the efficiency that people can heal themselves. That is to say that reverse curse technique when applied to somebody else is way less efficient than when applied to yourself, and therefore that Shoko shouldn't be able to apply the level of reverse curse technique that Gojo or Sukuna or even Yuji should be able to apply to themselves. But I'd like to remind the crowd that Shoko brought Yuji back from the dead, and he didn't have a heart. And on top of all this, Utahime is now no longer doing her solo activation dance to boost Gojo's cursed energy. At least, she shouldn't be. That would be kind of useless right now. Unless there's a fair amount of possibility that Shoko is being buffed. So while I am absolutely feeding into the copioid crisis like my name's Ronald Reagan, there is currently, as it stands, the best ever possible chance that Higuruma and Gojo are still alive. I know, I'm not helping. However, that's not what I want to talk about. See, the most perplexing part of this revelation that there's people going around scooping up bodies to me was the fact that Kirara was there. To which I simply have to ask, why? Now, we've already seen that Kirara's defensive abilities are next to none. If you need an area protected, Kirara is your girl. And thus the idea of Kirara being near Shoko, who absolutely needs to be protected, makes perfect sense. Because for those of you who don't remember, Kirara has one of the most complicated yet cool curse techniques in all of JJK. Her curse technique, Love Rendezvous, works by marking people or things with one of 5 stars. And those stars are based off the Southern Cross constellation. Now, if you're marked with a star, in order to get to something else marked with a star, you have to find all the other individual items or people marked with a star and go to those items or people in the order of the Southern Cross constellation as it pertains to the closeness to Earth. That is incredibly complicated, so let me break it down a little easier. Essentially, a constellation isn't flat in the sky. A constellation, while it may not look like it, has layers. The stars of Orion's belt do not go in a straight line across our sky. One of the suns is closer, one is somewhere in the middle, and one is the furthest away, which means that the stars that compose the Southern Cross constellation vary in how far they are from Earth. So let's say hypothetically, my glasses are marked with the closest star to Earth, and I'm marked with the farthest star from Earth. I would have to find the other 4 stars and touch them before I could ever get back to my glasses, which just essentially means that Kirara is able to set up a very complicated, non-obvious maze if she's able to interact with somebody's cursed energy. But there's more to it. If you deviate from the maze, that is to say that you go to the second closest star to the Earth before you go to the 4th closest star to the Earth, anything that is marked with the star that you are marked with will be attracted to you. So if I deviated from the maze while on my way to my glasses and my headphones were marked with the same star as me, they would fly over to me and hit me in the face. And no matter what I did to these headphones, if I threw them, kicked them, pushed them away, they would always be attracted to me. Now, well, if it's headphones, it's not all that dangerous, but if you mark a car or a house or a building, it definitely can be. So why would we need that particular technique while collecting bodies? Well, it is a possibility that Kirara was just thrown onto the team because we needed somebody, but isn't that kind of Mei's job? And while Mei was on Team's surprise attack to be completely useless, I'm just still kind of scratching my head as to why it's Kirara. I mean, maybe she's using her technique to pull people to Shoko. Maybe her technique allows Weeb to centralize on the teleportation return point. Or maybe, and this is grim, she's using her technique to pull everybody's body parts back together, which would be slightly necessary with somebody like Gojo. On top of this, it's important to note that her cursed technique only requires that she touch the cursed energy of the person she's trying to mark. And therefore, it's also a possibility that she was sent to pick up Higuruma because Sukuna has one hand laying on the ground. And as we all know, Sukuna's fingers are slightly imbued with his cursed energy. And thus there's also the possibility that Kirara was sent to pick up Higuruma so that she could touch Sukuna's cursed energy. But as it currently stands, we don't know, and I might be the only person legitimately asking that question. By the way, her presence in the chapter is immediately overshadowed, as after she takes Higuruma's body away, it's revealed that, oh yeah, Yuji has complete and total reverse curse technique. Like, we're not just talking fixing cuts and bumps and bruises. He regenerates the entirety of his own stomach. And now I'm only saying this because I know somewhere out there somebody will make this brain dead argument, but there is no way that the thing that Yuji was training with Choso and Noritoshi Kamo in was reverse curse technique, as neither of them are confirmed to know how to use it. He was training with them to learn blood manipulation. It is literally the only thing that both of them know. Now, after this revelation that Yuji is now, 30 times more powerful than he was before, we unfortunately kind of wander into Sukuna yapping territory, as Sukuna begins to ponder as to why Yuji getting back up every time he knocks him down is so irksome. And while he's pondering to himself, standing completely still on a battlefield, he reminds himself that his life is just killing time until he dies, which, when I guess you're the strongest entity on the entirety of the planet and you've been alive for close to 1,000 years in some categorization of living, I guess that is the conclusion you would come to. As Sukuna comes to the conclusion that he's always come to, that the only reason he's alive is to fight the strong, eat what he wants, and live completely free. Now, after coming to this astute conclusion, Sukuna comes to a part of his pondering that lost me a little bit. And this is mostly a symptom of the leaks that I was reading. Make sure you always read the official releases. They're just way better. Sukuna says that he gets irritated whenever he sees somebody die for their ideals. But then immediately after saying that, he says that there was somebody like Yuji 1,000 years ago who was willing to die for their ideals. And then he follows this up by saying that he was the person who changed 1,000 years ago. But then Sukuna says to Yuji that he isn't the person that he fought 1,000 years ago. He's just some brat from today. Now, while the way that it's worded in the leaks is slightly confusing, I think the gist of what Sukuna is saying here is that Yuji reminds him of somebody that he fought 1,000 years ago. Somebody whose will was so unbendable that it was actually Sukuna's will who bent first. And that person that Sukuna battled 1,000 years ago is probably the person who defeated Sukuna and cut him up into 20 fingers. And this isn't the first time that Sukuna has made some kind of observation tying Yuji to the past, as when Yuji bursts onto the stage during the Culling Games to battle against Sukuna after he's taken over Megumi's body, Sukuna makes a kind of passing observation about Yuji, saying that, oh, he's from that period, implying that Kenjaku has altered Yuji's body to resemble somebody possibly from the Heian period, and thus the idea that Yuji is either the reincarnation or the vessel of some legendary sorcerer from 1,000 years ago who defeated Sukuna has always been a theory passed around through the JJK community. And now it appears as though this is simply going to be more wood for the fire, as Suka is now rather blatantly tying Yuji to a sorcerer who had an unbending will 1,000 years ago. But just like Sukuna dismisses for the entire story, he dismisses this theory, possibly reassuring himself that there's no way that Yuji could be the sorcerer, possibly because he believes that Yuji doesn't live up to that hype, or because he's afraid of what that might mean. However, this doesn't mean that Sukuna doesn't acknowledge Yuji's strength. He does. As after this connection, Sukuna tells Yuji that he is indefatigable. That is a word I had to look up. It just means you're somebody who doesn't fatigue, but why add the duh in there? Indefatigable makes way more sense. The niceties don't last long, because after calling Yuji indefatigable, it's a very hard word to say. He says that he'll mince up everybody's ideals. And it's at this point that he adds a new rule. Through the Culling Game kind of bat thing. I forget its name. And that rule is that the merger between Japan and Tengen may now be conducted by Megumi, or Sukuna. Because even though Sukuna looks like Sukuna, Megumi's still in there. He then, for some reason, eats the rule bug thing. And it's at this point that we get to know Sukuna's true master plan. And that is to merge all of Japan with Tengen and then fight that version of Tengen. Yes, that's right. The final goal of the now main villain of JJK is to kill all of Japan to make a super Tengen and then fight that Tengen so that Sukuna can finally have what he dictates as a good fight. Which, like, I guess makes sense for Sukuna. Like, this entire chapter is about Sukuna not really knowing why he's alive. Like, he's saying, I eat when I want to eat, I kill those who are an eyesore, and I live how I want to live. And killing all of Japan to make a super Tengen so that he can finally have a good fight kind of lines up with those values. It's just still kind of wild. On top of the, Sukuna now being the person who's going to merge Japan with Tengen means that more likely than not, the person that Kenjaku was talking about when he said that somebody would inherit his will was Sukuna. And while I always thought that that was a possibility, it seemed too obvious. Like, all of us have been so trained by JJK to look for the least obvious answer to any possible motivation or question in this manga. And so when Kenjaku said that somebody's gonna inherit his will, we looked at Yuji, we looked at Takaba, we looked at Gojo, but none of us really looked at Sukuna, which, like, is definitely the most obvious answer. Like, if anybody's gonna inherit Kenjaku's will, yeah, it's probably the guy who's on his side. But then again, the obvious never happens in the story, so we've been trained to not make that conclusion. That's not true. The obvious does happen in this story, but only if you're incredibly macabre and you hate everything. But all of this, to me at least, essentially confirms that Kenny is dead and gone, as we now know who's inherited Kenjaku's will, and it's Sukuna. And Sukuna inheriting Kenjaku's will doesn't bring Kenjaku back to life in any capacity, which means that Sukuna now is the inheritor of Kenjaku's will, and the continuer of Kenjaku's master plan is all but guaranteed to be the final villain of JJK. But who's gonna take down this final villain? Well, after Sukuna screams out his master plan for all of Japan to hear, Yuta Okatsu kicks down the door waving the 4-4. But instead of the 4-4, it's Rika. Rika's here, and immediately begins the clash with Sukuna. Chapter ends with the biggest version of Rika we've ever seen, trying to smash Sukuna with one of her hands. And during this exchange, Sukuna is teasing Yuta, saying that if you don't defeat me, I'll kill everybody you've ever loved. To which Rika responds by saying, and at least this is what the leaks are saying, who the fuck are you talking to? And while that probably won't end up in the official translation, my god, do I hope it does. To which Sukuna retorts by saying, here she is, the queen. And thus in chapter 249, we're going to see the long-awaited battle between the king and queen of curses, which will probably result in Rika's death and Yuta's nerfing. But I do believe that during this clash between Yuta and Sukuna that there will be an opening created for either Yuji or somebody else to finish off Sukuna. Is at least what I believe would, like, 50% of my heart. Because the other 50% of my heart is like, okay, Nick, use anime logic. If a possible consequence or final form is ever hinted at, it will happen. And it will be up to the main characters of the story to go around that final circumstance and reach far beyond all that they were ever able to achieve. Now that Sukuna has said that he wants to merge all of Japan with Tengen to battle against Tengen, part of my heart is thinking, my god, that might just happen. Because it's been introduced. The concept has been introduced. It's what Sukuna wants. And I just don't see a world in which Yuta beats Sukuna. Listen, I understand that Yuta is incredibly powerful, but while Gojo was battling against Sukuna, Yuta was watching going, oh my god, I didn't know we could do half those things. And sure, Yuji is there, and maybe Yuji is a reincarnated 1,000-year-old sorcerer, but something is speaking to me from the back of my mind, saying that Sukuna is going to be successful in the giant Japanese merger. However, the overarching story about JJK will be about pride, and Sukuna will lose against this super version of Tengen, possibly because of the strength of all of the sorcerers absorbed into Tengen. And thus Sukuna will finally achieve the thing that he actually wants, death. And here's the thing, we know that Sukuna wants to die. He basically says it in this chapter, that he lives his life to fill out the time of his living before he dies. So maybe, just maybe, Sukuna achieves what he wants to. Battles against Super Tengen. It's just, listen, I understand that to get Super Tengen, you have to kill all of the Culling game participants, which is like everyone. But something about this concept being introduced makes me feel like we're gonna see it. But then again, JJK has max like 45 chapters left, which I guess could possibly be enough to kill everybody and introduce Super Tengen and then have Sukuna lose to Super Tengen, but just something, man. I can't let that idea go. But what do you guys think? Do you believe that we'll see Super Tengen? Do you believe that Yuji and Yuta will be enough to kill Sukuna? Do you believe that Nobara is waiting in the shadows to drive a nail through Sukuna's cut off hands? Let me know in the comments, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I'm aware that I look like if Bill Gates and Stone Cold Steve Austin had a child, but I love this top, and it's cold in my house.